Movement is life. It's not meant to be a burden. It's not meant to be something you check off a list. It's not meant to be this ideal to serve some other thing. It is your life. You will live better when you move more. So if you want to give yourself a fighting chance to be more conscious and awake, you have to implement movement.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network, teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, home, and the world at large. You just heard from Lara Heimann, founder of LYT Yoga Method. Lara used her experiences as a physical therapist, athlete, and yoga practitioner to create the method and emphasizes the brain and body connection, promoting both functional movement and spiritual wellness. During our conversation, Lara shares why she's made it her life's mission to get people moving, which actually makes us feel more connected to our minds. We also talk about how to develop a good habit loop without having to wait for motivation to strike. And as an added treat, she leads us through an exercise that cultivates mindful movement regardless of where you might be. But before we get to the body, let's start with mind and what consciousness means to Lara. Conscious Habit listeners, I am so excited for our conversation today. I think this is one to definitely bookmark and come back to because we talk often about the mind and how important that is in our lives. But today we're going to dig into the body and how that can help us get to where we want to be or it can hold us back. And our guest today is Lara Heimann. And y'all, she is doing some amazing things. You got to find her on social. We'll plug all of that at the end. Lara, welcome to the Conscious Habit Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, Amy. I'm really excited to be here.
I cannot wait to pick your brain, but we kick off every single episode. And I've never heard the definition exactly the same twice. So I'd love to ask this. When you hear that word consciousness, what does it mean to you?
I think in the most simple terms, it means being awake to everything in front of you in the moment to moment life. So many of us zone out, and that is because we have a lot to process, a lot that we're bombarded with. So if we can give ourselves a fighting chance to be awake, to make better decisions, to be more compassionate, patient, generous, I think all of that is about that feeling of being conscious.
What a beautiful definition. And people often call that the soft skills. And I'm like, those are the skills that are going to transcend this AI revolution and where technology is going to take us. We're going to need all of these skills, that level of consciousness, awareness, empathy, understanding to continue to be successful. So, love that definition.
And we need it for all the different roles that we play as parents, as partners, as leaders, as team members, as family members, as society members. We need it in so many ways. And it is the thread line that makes us better humans.
So that body awareness, that is your jam. You and I were geeking out on that. And I'd love to hear your story. Like, where and when did this become your thing where you're like, this is my mission on the planet?
I've always been very active, very fit, and loved movement. It was just in my genes. I grew up with 3 boys. I was always playing with them, super active. So that was just part of my ingredients. And I didn't think of it as anything that would turn into a profession. But when I actually applied to school, I was really planning to be a doctor. My dad was an orthopedic surgeon. I was always fascinated with the body and health and how a person could change another person's life through surgery or a rehabilitation or anything. And I just decided pretty early on that was not going to work well for the other things I want to do in my life because it's a very busy career. I also witnessed my dad working 12-hour days. But it was interesting because I went with this idea that I wanted to be a neurosurgeon because I had shadowed a neurosurgeon in early stages. And I just thought the brain thing was so cool. But when I went in the other direction of deciding not to do medicine, physical therapist was kind of along the same track with a much better lifestyle and actually with a much more engagement with your patients. When you're a doctor, your time is limited. And with PTs, our time is with the patient. That's what we do. And so I loved that as well because I always liked education and working with people. So this was just a great combination. Simultaneous to that, I was teaching aerobics. I just loved fitness and loved being in front of people, teaching them and feeling the energy of the room. And so when I graduated from grad school in physical therapy, I also found yoga. And I found yoga to be actually surprisingly similar to how I would feel when I would be running or in dance, this real spirit connection in that feeling of like really being embodied and feeling that flame that we all have that is lit up. When you're in it, you feel like anything is possible. And I think that is what drives us and what motivates us and what continues to inspire us through all the different years is that inner flame of feeling embodied in our bodies and understanding that. And I think with me, choosing this profession was just so in line with how I wanted to live my life. I wanted to be active. I didn't want a 9 to 5 sitting at a desk job. I loved education and I loved learning about the body, diving deep into that in a way that I could then distill it to anybody. So that translation of knowledge into something that's really palatable for anyone coming to a class has set me apart in many ways because there is a desire, a curiosity we all have to learn more about our bodies because we've been gifted these bodies that we're not taught much about, which is sad and ironic. So I'm trying to just fill in that gap. And it's just an honor to be able to do. And it's really led me to where I am today.
And I imagine life changing for people as well, because you're right. We don't know a lot about our bodies. We're just like, oh, I'm tired. I must need more sleep. And there's so many other things that could be like, it may be not sleep. It could be so many other things that come within that. And I teach meditation, but I often feel like I have to overcome the myths of meditation. What do you find are the myths of yoga or the myths of movement? What do people misunderstand about it?
Wow, a lot of things. One is that it is just physical. To me, movement is meditation if it's done in a conscious way, if it's done in a way that is turning your awareness inwards, that is connecting you to your brain, to your body, to your thoughts, all of that. That's a big misconception is that you either have to sit and meditate and clear or you're moving for your body to whatever your reasons are. And so that's one thing. This is a practice for your body. This is a practice for your spirit. Your body contains all of it. At the end of the day, if you don't have your body, you don't have your life. Your brain and your body are connected. Your brain is involved in all of this, and your brain is responsible for your perceptions and the way you process. And all of that is definitely impacted by meditation. And that's one of the biggest reasons people meditate is they need to try their best to harness this chaos that is in everybody's brain. Everybody thinks we live in an environment where it's almost impossible not to have that tiny bit or major chaos in the brain. And there's different ways of doing it, and the movement is one. The second thing is some people just think they're not good at movement, whatever that means. To me, it's like an idea that you have about yourself and a label, and anyone can learn to move their body no matter what. I've worked with people of all kinds of disease, disability, injury, etc. And it's not about what you're doing compared to someone else. It's about what you're doing and trying to improve and optimize that. And so just reframing what movement is and how it's a unique experience, although it can be done in a more global way. And then I think the other thing is that you're doomed to just deteriorate and not move well as you age. I think some of that is changing, but it's still there. I can hear it in the language. Unfortunately, a lot of the medical system reinforces that. Well, your knees hurt. You are 50, so that's common. That just reinforces this idea that my knees are bad because I'm this age and I'm going to have to eventually get them replaced. We have so much power within us in changing that dialogue and changing that perception. I've seen people who've moved better and they say, I feel better in my 60s than I did in my 30s. And a lot of that is because they've just shifted that understanding and wiring.
Yeah, that mind body spirit connection. I love that you said, like, it's all one thing. It's not like there's these separate things. They're all connected in different ways. Totally, our medical system does reinforce the idea of, well, you're this age, so you should just feel like shit. My 88-year-old grandmother, bless her heart, this woman walks 4 miles a day and she brags about how she passes all the old people at the gym and she just refuses to refer to herself as being old and she refuses to stop moving. I want to circle back because you mentioned the chaos in the brain, and you have a really great phrase for this that I'm going to borrow, the bitch in the attic.
I kind of borrowed that from one of my teachers. It wasn't mine. I was in a teacher training and we were talking about the chaos in the brain and that the loop that we get on because we influence ourselves the most because we're living in our bodies, we're hearing our thoughts the most. And those, of course, have probably been influenced greatly by culture, by our background, whether it was from our guardians who raised us or whatever it is, we have been obviously influenced by that. But then that loop continues, and that can be a bitch is living in the attic. And you're like, why are you living up there and saying these mean things to me and telling me I can't do this? And it's like, clear that bitch out and let's start over because that is a choice. That person doesn't have to live there rent free. They don't have to live there at all. This idea of neuroplasticity and the idea of habits and all of it is that we can change. We can rewrite our story. We can edit it. We can actually crumple the paper and throw it in the trash. And that's kind of that idea. It's like, get rid of that negativity. It's not something that you have to have permanently, indelibly imprinted in there. You can change it. It's going to be work. That's cool. I think work is another thing that if we learned early on, everything worth anything is work and work is good. It is driving us, it is inspiring us, it's making us wake up with purpose. And if that wasn't there, then we might just be stagnant and sluggy.
And again, like another misnomer is that people think that you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And the truth is, we have the ability to learn and grow and shift all the way until we bid farewell to this life. It doesn't ever stop. By the way, the book that taught me about the inner roommate that changed my life was The Untethered Soul. It was a total like, oh, you mean that voice in my head isn't me? You mean I don't have to listen to everything it says? Do you remember your journey of the disconnection of the thinking?
I feel like I had such a boost in my upbringing that I never had a permanent tenant there. I didn't have those thoughts. For me, I always had, and a lot of it I will say, I had a father who told me every single day how magnificent I was. That's a gift. So I didn't have to undo anything that someone told me negative. I didn't have to unlearn habits or mute any words that were spoken that were cruel or unkind or limiting. I was raised the opposite of a limiting environment. And that is everything. And so I feel that it is my duty, it is my calling to share that with others who do not necessarily have that gift. I just had such a head start. I never had the doubt that stops people. I certainly have had moments of trepidation, thinking things over and wondering, is this going to work? But it never stymied me. I was never paralyzed by it in a way that I've seen people. And I know so much of that is the upbringing, the words that we have received, what we practice for ourselves. So I haven't had to undo anything, which I recognize is just a gift in itself.
It truly is extraordinary, and how great that you recognize that it is a gift and that you're able to give that back to people. And anybody listening who has kiddos, your story is really powerful of nobody created the roadblocks for you because nobody told you you shouldn't, you couldn't, you can't, the world is hard. And sometimes parents, we always believe we're doing the right thing for our kids, that, everybody's operating from the highest, best knowledge they know how. We sometimes think we have to prepare them for this cruel, hard world. And so what we're doing is we're creating these internal limitations. The bitch in the attic gets louder saying, you can't, you won't, you shouldn't. And they may spend years in therapy or meditation trying to undo that.
Yeah. My parents modeled a lot of things without saying it necessarily. I certainly heard over and over, like, you can be whatever you want. That choice is yours. If I had decided to do something really walk a different path, maybe I would have heard something different because I did go into a path that my dad was familiar with, but he was always like, you could be whatever you want. But they weren't being like, oh my God, you're so smart, you're so this. I worked hard and there was probably an unspoken, not expectation, but just a bar that was there. Both my parents are very intelligent. There was a lot of intelligence in my family. All my brothers are like, one's a psychiatrist, one's a physical therapist as well. And that was always there as a bar, but it wasn't like we were pushed. It was like the environment was very healthy to want to be our best.
I love that. By the way, I think I heard that you're a triplet.
Yes. So I have an older brother who's 2.5 years older, and then I have two identical brothers who are part of my triplet package. I think all of these are key ingredients. I had a great network of just also feeling really safe and part of this family unit that was wonderful. And my brothers are the kindest. I would kind of boss them around, and now they're like 6'3" and 6'4", and they adore me and they're such good men. And I think I had really good men in my life. And I think I know I chose an amazing, good man. Whatever partner, heteronormative, homosexual, whatever partner it is that you choose, I think it does often reflect your background. So then I not only came from this really wonderful background of caring and supportive humans, I chose one as my partner. And I always credit my husband for always being like, yes. Is it okay if I do this? Yes. What do you think about me opening up a yoga studio? Yes. He's been my biggest cheerleader, and all of those things help. I recognize I had a lot of the material and then a lot of support.
It's really a testament to both of those things that we talked about, how you're brought up in that family unit and feeling like you belonged and not creating those mental roadblocks or those limitations. And then who you surround yourself with matters. We do become like the people that we're around. And so, anybody listening right now, if you're like, I did not have that same childhood that Lara had, I would wish I did, but I didn't. The difference that we can make now is who do you invite into your inner circle? Because that is such a major game changer in our own mindset and our belief in the world and our belief in ourselves. So I can only imagine you probably have a pretty kick ass circle around you, Laura, both your inner unit and everybody in the lit community.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. Like, I was just at a yoga festival and there's people that travel to be there who've done my trainings or taken classes. I would meet people and they'd say, "Oh, I saw somebody who's done your training," and they were just going on and on about how I should take this class. And it's like they're really happy, productive, inspiring individuals. And I think we share that. It is energy. We are also bodies of energy. So what we put out is really important. And then what we surround ourselves with. So anybody listening who didn't have necessarily the upbringing I did, you can also choose, like, if you have a boss or employees or whatever that are bringing you down, that's not going to change most likely. I also feel like I have attracted really amazing people who work hard, who are passionate about the brand, who show up. And I, like my parents, they do the work. I don't micromanage. I'm very hands off in a lot of ways because the bar is set high and they all are just incredible. So I do think there's a little magic in the formula, but there's also that being conscious. If you're awake and feeling like this person is probably not going to vibe well, no matter what their credentials are, listen to that.
I would imagine that the movement and this connection to body allows you to also be more connected to your mind and connected to your gut, that it's not this one and the same. So if you feel like, I don't know what my gut instinct is, I'm a people pleaser, I just want to say yes, there's a couple things that I know that Lara can help us break down here. Number one is check your standards, because we will accept what we believe we are worthy of having. So if you have people around you who do not see your worth, it's not about them. It's because you don't think you're worthy of being surrounded by people who see your worth. It's your biggest lesson. The second thing is maybe you're disconnected from your gut because you don't have that mind, body, spirit connection. So, Laura, if somebody's feeling that way, what advice do you give them? Where do they start?
Connect to your body. And what does that mean? It might mean different things for different people, but we have these energy stations in our body and they're not woo woo. They're actually scientifically aligned with different neurons along our spinal cord, and they're called chakras. And I don't think you even have to like believe in them, but believe that there is this highway of communication. Our goal is to have this wiring between our brain and body, and that includes all the different sensations and the messages that we get, very clear and not delayed and not faulty. And so, one is you need to get into your body. Unfortunately, in our society, because we have so many messages that we receive, our brain is pretty good at filtering them out. So, if we start to ignore signals that we're getting from our body to our brain, for example, if you aren't getting up regularly, you have basically muted those very important messages we get from our nervous system that tell us we need to get up and move. Any animal, any vertebrate, including our children, babies, after a while of being still or stationary, they do something. They get up and move. And it doesn't have to be like get up and take a walk. It could be get up and wiggle your ribs or do a couple squats or swing your arms. Just start to listen, incorporate movement to turn the volume up more so that you have these signals and that you're listening to them. At the end of the day, nothing is more important than that. A deadline, a meeting, a whatever, nothing is more important than your communication with yourself because that's who you're with your entire life. I had a question the other day from someone. They said, well, I sit at a desk for 8 hours. What do you recommend? Recommend you get up every 10 minutes of every hour, minimum. If that means you set an alarm, whatever, and you don't yet feel those itchiness that, whoa, I got to get up, you will create it. You start to move, your body feels better with the movement. It gets rid of some of that tension that accumulates, and then it'll send you the signal before you have to think about it. And then respond to that signal. So your brain's like, this is an important message, and I'm going to listen to it. Then that starts to trickle down into messages that you get from instinct, your gut. There's a lot of this gut brain connection. And so you start to work it through that area. How do you do it? The way you eat, the way you move. You do core work. It doesn't have to be like on the ground on your back, but it could be some planks, do some quadruped, do something where you feel like you have to hold your center and get some fire in there because that is going to give you a better connection of messaging to the brain. We do all of this in the LYT yoga method. And I always take a little bit of a side door, not like I'm trying to hide behind it, but it's not like you're anticipating it, you create it. And then it's always this now I feel like I can't sit like this, or I don't want to talk to this person this way, or I don't want to respond this way. And you don't really know why, but the why is there because you've created it.
I imagine this is another myth you've got to overcome is people think movement and exercise are one and the same. And then they're like, I'm not motivated or I don't have time or whatever the inner challenges are. And I love that you say it could just be a wiggle to create awareness.
Yes. You just think about it like movement is life. It's not meant to be a burden. It's not meant to be something you check off a list. It's not meant to be this ideal to serve some other thing that you think, oh, I need to do this to lose weight. It is your life. You will live better when you move more. That is the way it's set up. So if you want to give yourself a fighting chance to be more conscious and awake, you have to implement movement. It is part of that. We are more awake when we move. We are less awake when we don't move. We know that. So why do we not choose to move? And it's because of inertia. Newton's law comes into place. Things at rest want to stay at rest. And something that is more powerful has to come in and start that getting out of rest state. That's where habits come in. A habit loop is something you form and you don't have to feel the end result, but your brain knows the end result before you even start. That's when you develop a good habit loop. You start it because your brain remembers how it's going to impact you. Until that is in there hardwired, you will have to set reminders and say, hey, it's time to move. I'm going to be a happier person. I'm going to be a nicer person. I'm going to have more energy to give to myself and to others. I'm going to make better choices. I'm going to be more awake, more conscious. All of these things, you make it a habit and these things will happen. But the habit formation takes some time and just put in all of the tools that you need to give it time. I couldn't not move. I was telling you before we got on, stuck in an airport for 2 days. And I got a little bit of feeling of what people must feel like when they sit at a desk. And it's pretty awful. And I still would get up and move because it's hardwired. We all start off this way. But once we get at a desk in first, second grade, where we're sitting a lot of the day, that's where it starts to get some kinks in the wire.
Your brain to be creative needs movement.
Yes. I mean, I've been doing this for so long. I teach 7 classes a week. I've been teaching that many for 20 some years. And when I hear people say they run out of ideas, I think, wow, how could you run out of idea of moving your body? And I realize it's because of that. My creativity is just innately interlinked with my own movement creation, but also brand creation and everything.
Any listeners, this is where I was like, you might want to bookmark this because if you're feeling stagnant and you mentioned energy, like I'm feeling tired, I've got the 2 p.m. slump, I want to go get coffee. We're kind of reaching for those things that we think is going to give us the boost. And it may be as simple as just move your body, go take a quick walk outside or do some stretching or something of that nature. And I would imagine sitting for 8 hours straight probably does create a decline in our brain function.
Oh, completely. Think about, like, again, I use the plane and I just happen to have this, but I always use the plane analogy. If you've been on a plane and if you haven't, think of a long car ride. You travel, you're on this plane, you're on the car ride, and you get to where you're going. And what do you feel like doing? You feel like taking a nap. Almost everybody. You're not energized. Why? You've done nothing. You've been sitting cooped in, and yet you're tired. And it shows you your brain function just starts to go way down. I think that's the most extreme. I have problems with this too because I'm like, I just wanna lie down, and I just know, like, walk, move, 5 minutes, and you'll feel different. So that's where you have to just override that fatigue for your body because it's done nothing, and it's fatigue for your energy, and you're not productive, and that's been also shown over and over again. People that get up and take more breaks are ultimately more productive in a compressed time period than people who have let it go for a long time and try to be you just aren't. We just aren't fresh.
I was just talking with a colleague about this recently where I was like, have you ever noticed that the lower the energy, the worse your decision making when it comes to food?
You go for the, like, sugary or salty or, like, crunchy or, like, snacky instead of, fresh fruit or vegetable. Yeah. It's all wrapped in there, and then it becomes a habit of itself, and so the beautiful thing about the brain is we can change it anytime. It's going to take work, and isn't that amazing? A big change in your life is gonna be work. Like, embrace it. I think work, we associate it with things that aren't happy, and it's work is energy. That's the way I also, like, reframe it. Energy is work. There is a formula in physics, and energy is required for that. And there's a loop. When you work, you have more energy.
It's definitely that catch 22, isn't it? Where it's like, oh, I don't have the energy to move, but you don't have the energy because you haven't moved. Something a coach taught me that was really life changing, and I am not perfect at it, is we cannot wait to feel motivated to act because motivation is often an after effect. It's not a prelude. It doesn't come prior to, it usually comes after the act.
It is part of the feedback loop, but you're right. It's just like any habit. We can't wait for like a big bell to ring or some kind of motivational thing. Like we got to start it. The reward is that you feel different and you want to come back for that reward and you come back and you come back. And the motivation is then built into that loop. There's so many different ways of trying to create that. Some people, they just have a timer and that's enough for them, or some like aspirational words, or they might need to hire somebody. If you have an appointment and you've paid for it, you're going to show up. That's great. And if you don't want to go that route, have a friend, an accountability partner. You might need a lot of different tools to help you create that loop, that habit, but it's so worth it because eventually it will just be mostly you. And you want to set yourself up. Then that's what inspires those good feelings toward yourself. Look at me and what I did, and I might need some help along the way, but I'm doing it. We should give ourselves a big hug and pat on the back more often.
I've mentioned this on a few podcasts recently, but this is an epiphany I've had where I'm like, oh, you know what? I am my only guarantee forever and always. And I am stuck with me every second of every day for my entire life. I might as well learn how to really like myself.
It is absolutely our longest relationship we'll ever have.
And often the most dysfunctional for many of us.
Listen, I'm a huge fan of therapy if people need that. That is an element. It is not going to do everything. You have to get into your body. And I've had a lot of psychotherapists who have gone through my training and they're like, this added element of then getting my clients up and moving, their growth has just escalated exponentially. We have to look at these, all the things do come through the body.
So tell us about the LYT method, which by the way, I've been telling all my friends all week, like it's lit. It's the LYT method so that they know how to find you. What is it? How is it similar and how is it different from traditional yoga?
I'll start with similar. So LYT is, first of all, stands for Lara's yoga technique. So yoga is in there and More importantly, it's an onomatopoeia. You say it, you feel it. We want to all feel lit up. Its purpose is to raise consciousness. It's to pay attention. It's to be awake. It's to better balance ourselves from the inside out, outside in, so that we are better humans in the world. I'm not saying people that go to the gym don't have that aspiration, but that might not be one of the pillars to it. They're going because they know it feels better. So that's where I feel like it's similar to yoga, because I feel like yoga, since the beginning, its purpose was definitely going inward to improve an outward experience. And that's a two-way street. And there is a level of consciousness that we are inviting and we are hoping that's going to be there. And there are some definitely yoga poses. That's how it's similar. How it's different is it's much more than just yoga poses in terms of the practice of it. I taught yoga, more classical vinyasa, for a while, and I felt that it was a little bit in a box, that it was dictated by some other human that we somehow had given this spiritual authority to. So, from a physical standpoint, biomechanical standpoint, neurological standpoint, I feel like it was missing some big key pieces. And honestly, I don't feel like it's super inclusive the way it has been set up. It's like, here's a pose, hope you can get into it. And if you don't have the body that can get into it, then it's going to make you probably feel bad about yourself. It's certainly not its purpose, but in its practice, that's how it's been presented. So, bendy people have been highly rewarded. And unfortunately, many of them should not be doing all the things because they don't have the neurological feedback. They're hypermobile. And then people who aren't bendy haven't been as welcome, all of that. And I feel like some of the long term impact of it is not really examined. So, what LYT does is it brings in more physical therapy informed type of movement and drills that is meant to be balancing for the body, with this idea of understanding postural training, core integration, and moving in transitions in the way yoga does, but paying more attention to those transitions versus just the poses and then the transitions get you there. It's functional movement, physical therapy, it's yoga, it's core training, it's stress relief, and it's basically all of that under the umbrella of improving brain body connection and teaching how to do it. It's not calling out poses, but really educating people, because I want people to take this into their lives and apply it.
I like yoga, and you're right. I have seen where some people really struggle with it if you don't have the ability to be flexible or the physical ability to do it. And I love that your approach is to keep people's bodies functional. And I think it's Dr. Mark Hyman, different spelling than your name.
And my husband's Mark Hyman, which is so funny. Yeah.
So he says, I have a goal of being as young as I can, as old as possible, or something like that. And so I think what you're doing is just trying, by keeping people's bodies moving in a very functional way, in a way that works for their abilities, it's keeping their body functional so that when they are 55 or 60 or whatever, and the doc says, oh, that's normal for your age, you can say, not if we're moving our bodies in the right way.
Exactly. I'm gonna be 54 in October, and I was saying that because I was teaching a handstand class this last weekend, and several women afterwards said, I was just saying it like I taught myself at 36 and now I'm 54. I was just trying to give them some kind of context, but they were like, "I really appreciated you sharing that because this gives me a lot of hope." And I just think of like, I'm young in my body and in my spirit. This is where my postgraduate in neurological training, neuromuscular training really comes into play, is I just share that with people to really know that it's not like we have a do-over, but every day in a way is an improvement if we want it to be. We do not have to just assume this is going to be a decline, but we can live and breathe and move with joy. Whether you take the train or you just take classes on the platform, you're going to learn about your body. You're not going to just feel good for that hour. You're going to understand what a hip joint is and why it's important and why the scapula is so important for shoulder mechanics and health, how breathing is more optimal in a certain way. We don't shy away from that, but we can teach it in a very palatable way because it is infused throughout. And we have many physical therapists who teach it, but we have people who are not physical therapists, and people assume they are physical therapists because they're so knowledgeable. So that's the other thing, is everyone that teaches this has been trained by me. The quality control is high. And that's the other thing in the yoga world. I felt like you could go to one studio, and even within a studio, there could be a variety of types of teachers and not necessarily everybody's speaking the same language. It can be very confusing. So everybody's taught by me, but brings their own personality and zest to it.
I love that. And your team has done work in companies. Can you tell us a little bit about what you've done in the corporate world?
We have the online platform and we've developed special collections of classes for people to do at work or after work, or to not only help improve some of the work related remedies, but I've also gone into corporations to talk about this, to reframe. I give them really small doses of what they can do and inspire them to help each other, to check in with each other. And they love it because, again, a lot of people are feeling terrible about themselves. They have to work, they have to make money, they have to do this. And then it's like they put themselves at the bottom. You've got to be your best cheerleader. And to do that doesn't mean that you have to go to the gym and just pump whatever you're going to do. If that makes you happy, great, then do that. But if it feels like it's something that you think you have to do, I just want you to implement movement during the day. So I just talk all about that and how they can do this for stress relief, for more energy, ideas about joint discomfort and pain, and how a lot of that is just that they're not moving enough.
Could we go through as we kind of wrap up today? Is there an exercise we could walk the listeners through? I know you and I talked about something posture related, and I wonder if there's an exercise we could get people's bodies moving.
Yeah, sure. Everybody could just, whether they're sitting or standing, but obviously standing is going to be better because you're on your feet. But if you're listening and you're driving in a car, you can try this. And that is just grow your spine and just do it as like an inward, like somebody's just hugging around your spine and pulling it long. And when you do that, whether you feel any major movement, start connecting to those muscles. Those are your core postural muscles. So, core muscles are not just abdominals, they're all the muscles that support the axis of the spine, your pelvis, your shoulders. And then move your head back in space. But instead of trying to double chin, think of like somebody trying to uncork the back of your hairline, lengthening it up, and then just grow the spine some more and just feel like hopefully there's some action around that. And then you can just start to move your rib cage around your spine. Just circle your ribs. Then you're not trying to hold the spine like straight, but you're moving around it, getting into your guts. That should feel like there's muscles that are doing that action. So I always talk about if you were going to wash a pot, you wouldn't just pour water on it and then circle the other way. You would get a sponge and you would get some energy behind it. And that's what we're doing is we're trying to go in and grip the sponge and squeeze it a little bit. And that these are the muscles. This can help your digestion. This can help your breathing. And then just when you stop doing that, notice if you have felt anything. If it's just a connection, if it's like, oh, I want to do that some more. Standing is great. Reaching your arms up and doing it, circling like that when you're standing and circling the other way. You start in your center and you go in either direction, but you grow your spine because so many people are around it. And even if it doesn't feel like you're going to change that, you are going to change that because this is not cement we're dealing with. This is like clay that we can get wet and it can mobilize and it can change.
That was a good exercise. I followed along with her, by the way, listeners. I was moving around, like doing a little shake in there. And even in that elongating the spine, I felt a few pops happening. It created a lot of awareness of the muscles supporting the spine. Those acts of awareness within the body, there is a ripple effect where we may become more aware of our mind. We may become more aware of the emotions of others. I feel like there's a ripple effect in the good that can happen from mind, body, spirit to EQ to so many other things. So, Lara, thank you for joining us and sharing your wisdom and your passion and where it came from and a little bit about the LYT method. But how can our listeners find you?
The best place is just to go to the website. You can type in LYT Yoga or litmethod.com. They both go to the same area. And then we have all the information about LYT, the brand. We have places to go for our online classes. We have over 1,000 classes. They're not all up at one time, but so many classes. And you can search for duration, level, intensity, body parts, or many other themes. I also have a podcast. You could check that out, Redefining Yoga podcast. And find me on Instagram at lara.heimann or LYT Yoga Method.
Thank you so much.
It's really been such a pleasure to talk to you.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are my 3 takeaways from Lara and what we can do to incorporate them into our lives. Number 1, connect to your body. How connected are you to the movement? There's so many times when we are running a million miles a minute that maybe our brain is working faster than our body can keep up, and we tend to make more mistakes or we tend to get injured more. And so, what would happen if every day you took a little bit of time to just slow down and connect to the body? Number 2, movement goes beyond the physical. If we have a big goal or even just activities that require our mind to be fully engaged, we need our body to come along for the ride. So, moving, stretching, good posture, as Laura shared with us, can make all the difference in our outcomes. And lastly, if you're feeling stuck, energy is required for change. Get up and move around. Our bodies are not made to sit constantly. We need to get outside. We need to maybe do some bending back and forth. We need to come back to the body as often as possible to allow that energy to move. Thanks for listening to Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. If you have questions for me or our guest, or you're looking for more ways to just live or lead more consciously, head over to Facebook. We have a Conscious Habit community there. Let's keep this conversation going. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.